Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome in to a new edition of the Batter Up podcast, sponsored by the Dugout of Millwood here on the Sports Insanity Network. I am Mike Rifkin. Today's episode will be heavy. We're going to do a lot of stuff on this episode. We're going to preview the playoffs in Major League Baseball as the regular season is concluded. We are going to go through some players who have already announced they will, players and managers who have announced they will not return next season. They will retire. We'll go through the David Stearns press conference that just ended with the New York Mets. But we start with a little bit some sad news. Former Red Sox pitcher and current broadcaster Tim Wakefield passed away Sunday at the age of 57 due to brain cancer. Uh, Tim Wakefield, he wasn't the best pitcher in baseball, but he was a very good pitcher, knuckleballer. He was a guy you felt really good. Uh, you felt good for in 2004 when the Red Sox broke the curse, and uh, the Red Sox put out a statement, and I'll get into the reason why I said the curse thing in a second. Here's the Red Sox tweet from yesterday. Our hearts are broken with the loss of Tim Wakefield. Wake embodied true goodness, a devoted husband, father, team, and teammate, beloved broadcaster, and the ultimate community leader. He gave so much to the game and all of Red Sox Nation. Our deepest love and thoughts are with Stacy, Trevor, Brianna, and the whole Wakefield family. Uh, so I'll go that's from the Red Sox. So I'll go back to what I was talking about before. In 2004, when the Red Sox broke the curse, because in 2003, if you remember, Tim Wakefield was the guy who gave up the home run to Aaron Boone in Game 7 of the 03 ALCS. And had the curse never, if the Red Sox hadn't won in 04 and 07, and then more recently, but he was a part of the 04 and 07 teams. How would he be looked at in Red Sox history? I know now that sounds like a terrible thing to say, but Tim Wakefield was the Red Sox. He was a constant. Him, guys like Trot Nixon. Uh, they got other guys via trade and free agency, but Tim Wakefield was a constant. I was looking at his baseball reference page earlier, and he pitched his first 2 years with the Pittsburgh Pirates, and I didn't even know that, to be honest with you. I thought he was a Red Sox lifer, but from 1995 to 2011, he spent 17 years in Boston. 186 wins, 4.43 ERA, 22 saves. Uh, just a really good pitcher. Um, and from what I've read, a great guy. And his teammates loved him. Pedro Martinez put out a great tweet. Mike Lowell put out a great tweet. Um, so 57. It's just very sad. Condolences to the Wakefield family, to the Red Sox, and the Red Sox fans, because Tim Wakefield was a beloved individual. So condolences to the family and the Red Sox. So. But we'll dive into the playoffs now. As I mentioned, regular season is over in Major League Baseball. The way the playoffs shake out, very interesting in the this wild card round. It's going to be very interesting. The two buys in each league, and then you get the series themselves. So the buys in the American League go to the Baltimore Orioles and the Houston Astros. Not the Texas Rangers. The Astros go into Arizona, beat up the Diamondbacks. The Rangers lose 3 of 4 to the Seattle Mariners. The only game they did win knocked the Mariners out of the playoffs, but they did lose the division to Houston. So those are your two buys in the American League. In the National League, The Braves and the Dodgers get the bye. So here's how the matchups align, and then we'll get into the previews. The American League, you get Rays Rangers, which I think will be a phenomenal series. We'll dive into it. And then we get the Twins and the Blue Jays. So those are the two series on the American League side. Twins, Blue Jays, the winner plays the Astros. Rays, Rangers, the winner plays the Baltimore Orioles. National League, you get the Diamondbacks and the Brewers. The winner plays the Dodgers. And Marlins, Phillies. And this is really interesting. The winner of Marlins, Phillies plays the Braves. So the NL East gets its whole situation there in the bracket. So that's how this is going to work for Major League Baseball, the playoffs. So, as I mentioned, we'll dive into the American League. We'll start with Rays Rangers, and I think this is the more, I don't want to say more interesting of the two series, but I think this one could go either way. I do lean a particular way, and I'll get into it in a second, as well as the old ops guy did send me his predictions for the playoffs. All right, so Rays Rangers. Texas won the season series 4-2. That included a sweep right after the All-Star break. I believe it was right after the All-Star. Yeah, right after the All-Star break, the Rangers swept them at home. The Rays took 2 of 3 the first time the two teams played in June. Just some numbers here for them. Corey Seager, who's going to be an MVP candidate, he will not win AL MVP. We'll do a whole awards thing later at a later date. Corey Seager against Tampa at 320, 2 homers, 8 RBIs. But in his career in the playoffs, he's 13 homer, 36 RBI. So he's a guy with playoff experience. He's a guy who had a great year for Texas. And he's been in this spot. And let's be real honest, he's played against this team. 2020 World Series, Dodgers Rays. He was a member of the Dodgers. So Corey Seager is a guy to watch. Marcus Semien is a guy to watch for the Texas Rangers. The young players too, Josh Young, Jonah Heim, Adolis Garcia, who are getting this experience for the first time. Then you look at Tampa Bay. Randy Arozarena against Texas hit 250 with a home run and 3 RBIs. He had a great postseason in 2020 as well. Remember, that was his coming out party. But between him and Yandy Diaz and the depth that Tampa has, they have a couple of critical things they're missing. Both teams do. For Tampa, they're going to be without. Wander Franco has his legal situation, but one of the lows just got hurt. I'm trying to remember which low. I think it was Brandon Lau, but I'm gonna double check that. But this should be a fun series. Texas is going to be without Max Scherzer. They're going to be without Jacob deGrom. They're going to be without John Gray. So 3 of their top 4 starting pitchers, they're not going to have. So that's a huge blow for Texas. Now, for the Rays, they're going to be without Shane McClanahan, who underwent Tommy John surgery. So that's the big question mark, this is from 10 days ago. Which starting rotation is going to be better? The Rays have had injuries to their rotation all year. Brandon Lau is going to be out 4 to 6 weeks with a right patella fracture. And this came out a couple of days ago. So that's a big loss for the Rays. So the question is going to be, which pitching staff do you like the Rays pitching staff and offense more, or do you like Texas's beat up pitching staff and offense more? I love Texas's offense. The offense has done everything all year. I like the Rays at home to win this series. With Glass now being the best starter, And if they get into a game 3, I trust the Rays. That's where I'm leaning. I'm going Rays in 3. It'll be a tight series, ultra competitive, but I do think uh, the injuries hurt the Rangers in the rotation. But this should be a great series. The old ops guy has Tampa Bay as well, beating Houston. We're gonna hopefully differ on something. The Twins and the Blue Jays. So this is a series that'll be interesting. Uh, they split. They split 3-3. In May, the Blue Jays took 2 out of 3, and in early June, the Twins took 2 of 3. In that's so Vlad Jr. for Toronto didn't have a great year against Toronto. One hit 160 with 2 RBIs. Bo Bichette hit 333 with 2 homers and 7 RBIs. Carlos Correa for the Twins hit over 300 with a home run, 4 RBIs against Toronto. Correa in the playoffs, 272, 18 homers, 59 RBIs, and a 3. I'm not sure if I wrote 344, 394. That's the genius right there. But Carlos Correa is a playoff player, playoff proven player. And he's really the only one on this Minnesota team that, has those big stats. Because he's been there, he was there so much with the Astros. It's 344. Okay, so I wrote 344, and I couldn't tell if it was a 4 or not. That's great hammering. Correa's been there, done that. Toronto last year, they had the wild card wrapped up against Seattle before they blew a big lead in game 2 and then got blown out in game 3. Toronto's the team, man. In the American League, I really like them. I want to really like them. They have the starting pitching. They have a decent bullpen. And I'm just waiting for this offense to explode. They're good. They are very, very good. But you need them here. And I think them playing on the road will help them. They have, in my opinion, they have the better pitching, starting pitch than the Minnesota Twins. They have, I think, the most. I think they have a deeper lineup than the Twins. The Twins have a good lineup, especially if they're healthy, with guys like Buxton and Royce Lewis. But if the Blue Jays are healthy and you have Vlad, you have Bichette, Whit Merrifield, who I think could play a massive part in this series, with his where he could play flexibility, playing wherever, his speed. George Springer's a proven playoff player as well. I just think the Blue Jays. I'm going to take the Blue Jays. The old ops guy's taking the Blue Jays as well. I just think they're a little bit better than the Minnesota Twins. I like Minnesota. I don't think Minnesota's far away. I don't think Minnesota's bad. The problem with Minnesota is they weren't great this year for a division winner. And they kind of have this feeling like, I don't know if they're good, if they're not good. Were they a product of a bad division? And I think that doubt gives them an advantage going into a little bit Minnesota, because who knows what to expect. The Twins have also lost 18 straight playoff games, most of that against the Yankees. But I think this is a situation where if Toronto can just settle down, get what they've gotten all year, which is great starting pitching, I think the Blue Jays win this series. And I would say in 2 games. I think Toronto could win 2. Win in 2. I like Minnesota. Would it shock me if Minnesota wins? Tiny bit. Tiny bit. Just to finish off what the old ops guy has, he says, Tampa Bay would play Houston in the ALCS, and Houston would play Atlanta in the World Series. So that's Mark's prediction on how the World Series plays out. But yeah, we're in agreement on the American League for sure. Um, on to the National League, and we'll start. We'll start with the really interesting one. The Diamondback, not the Marlins and the Phillies, and look at the numbers in their regular season series. The numbers are very similar. The Marlins win the season series 7-6. Home runs, I think, were similar. ERA was similar. Uh, you know, this is a fascinating series. I've said for a long time, I think the Phillies are the biggest threat to the Braves in the National League, and I'm going to stick with my guns on that one. Um, I just think I don't know what to expect from the Marlins. I don't, but the Marlins have been chippy all year. They found a way in. Uh, I also think one of the interesting races in the National League when we get to award season is Manager of the Year. You got Skip Schumacher, you got Torey Lovello. Uh, you got a lot of guys. So to consider, I'm going to take the Phillies in three. I think the Phillies rotation is good enough. Their bullpen's good, and that offense is deep. Castellanos, talk about bounce back year. Nick Castellanos has had a bounce back year. Trey Turner, after the standing ovation, he got red hot. Kyle Schwarber at the top. And then they have I didn't even get to Bryce Harper, but they have two guys who I think are unsung heroes. Alec Bohm had a pretty nice year, and Bryson Stott, who could do a little bit of everything for him. He brings some speed, gives him a little bit of power, a good base runner. That's the kind of guy who wins in the playoffs, Bryson Stott. So I like the Phillies in this series. I think it'll take three, because I think the Marlins are going to steal one of the first two. I really do. So there's that. Uh, and the old ops guy's got the Marlins beating the Phillies. Uh, I'm not. Yeah, he's got the Marlins in an upset. The other one's the Diamondbacks and the Brewers, and this is really interesting because these are two teams that I think are very similar to one another. The Diamondbacks won 4 of 6 from the Brewers. Uh, and think about the first 2 games of how this series could go, because I'm going to presume that the Brewers would throw Corbin Burns, Brandon Woodruff in either order, and then Arizona, who actually had to play meaningful games this weekend against the Houston Astros. How does their rotation align? Do they have Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly for these first 2 games? Do they have to wait till game 2 to get one of them? That's a really interesting question. And there's something about the Brewers. I think the Brewers are. I know they can't be a Cinderella team like March Madness because they won the NL Central, but man, I don't think we're giving them enough love. I really don't. Burns, Woodruff, Freddie, Peralta, in three, the 3 starters. Offensively, they've been scoring runs. Adames has had a good year. Not offensively, but defensively, he's had a good year. They've got young kids who've had a pretty good year. Mitchell and uh, Terang. Christian Yelich was able to stay healthy. That's massive. And then Mark Hanna comes in from the Mets, and he's been great for them. And they have a manager in Craig Counsell, and I know a lot of people are looking at Craig Counsell for another reason because his contractual situation. I'm not going to touch that right now. I'll touch it in a few minutes when I get to the David Stearns presser. Craig Counsell's been there, done that for this team. I also think it's ironic because he helped win the World Series for the Diamondbacks in '01. So I think that is amazing stuff. Arizona's a good team too. I mean, they're young. Corbin Carroll had a pretty good year. He'll win Rookie of the Year, but he had 211 and with 2 homers against Milwaukee. So he kind of struggled in those 6 games. Christian Yelich had 4 RBIs in the 6 games for Milwaukee. It comes down to who's going to get the better starting pitch. Runs are going to be at a premium in this one. Like Toronto, Minnesota, that could be runs galore. But this one, I think pitching is the name of the game. And with Burns, Woodruff, and Peralta, I kind of trust that a little bit more than I trust Gallen, Kelly, and I don't know who would start Game 3 for Arizona at the moment. They got a couple of younger guys who they would go to. Would they go to a bullpen game? I'm not sure. I like Milwaukee. I like Milwaukee. I differ with the old ops guy in the National League. I like Philly and Milwaukee. He likes Arizona and Miami. But again, he has the Braves and Dodgers in the NLCS, and he has the Braves and Astros in the World Series. While I think that's probably what it would be, I wouldn't be shocked if Philly played in the World Series. I wouldn't be. I think you make a case for a lot of these teams that could play in the World Series. This is going to be a fun playoff. But I like Houston. I think Houston wins it all. I think everyone fell in love with a lot of parts of other teams. The Rangers' offense, Baltimore's young guys, Tampa Bay's got something. The Astros are coming in here, winning the AL West again, and I feel like they're flying under the radar. Oh well, Verlander, is older. Framber Valdez hasn't had a great year. Christian Javier struggled. Christian Javier threw a no-hitter in the World Series last year. Framber Valdez is battle tested, and there's nobody in the playoffs. Any of these teams, you can give me any one of these 4 teams, or any one of these teams in the playoffs. The guy I want in a big game is still Justin Verlander. And let's top this whole thing off. The offense is clicking. Jose Abreu just had his best series as an Astro. Jose Altuve is healthy. Michael Brantley's healthy. Jeremy Pena won the ALCS and World Series MVP last year. Bregman's going. Oh, yeah, I got this guy named Jordan Alvarez as my DH. I am in on the Houston Astros repeating. I really am. I think they're great. I think they repeat. I think they go out. I think they beat the winner of Brave. In my opinion, it's Brave Phillies in the DS. The way it shakes out, I think the winner of that series wins the National League, and that's painful for me to say as a Met fan, but I think it's Braves. The winner of Braves Phillies goes to the World Series. So that's where I'm at. Okay. The last thing I'm gonna hit you with a couple of other things. David Stearns will come up in a minute, but Adam Wainwright, Miguel Cabrera, Zach Greinke, and Terry Francona, four guys who it's been well perceived. Miguel Cabrera, we knew. Miguel Cabrera announced before the season he was going to retire after this year. Terry Francona announced a couple of weeks ago. He didn't announce it. It had been speculated for a couple of weeks he's going to retire after the season. Adam Wainwright never announced it, Adam Wainwright never announced it, but it was highly speculative that he would retire after this year. And so those guys got to go out on the, and Zach Greinke got to start yesterday for the Royals, and he got to win. I think all four of those guys deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. Miguel Cabrera is the best hitter of his generation. He's the last guy to win a triple crown. He, 3,000 over 3,000 hits, 500 homers. I go back to the 03 World Series when he homered off of Roger Clemens. And then he made a real name for himself in Detroit. And he was a pro's pro, great player, one of the best hitters I've ever seen, probably one of the best hitters in the history of baseball. It was great seeing him. Miguel Cabrera deserved everything he got. He was a great player. I love what the Tigers did for him this weekend. They ended the game. They put him at first base before AJ Hinch pulled him. To a standing ovation. And in 5 years, he's going into Cooperstown. So he was such a great player, Miguel Cabrera. Excuse me. Adam Wainwright was a really good pitcher, and I put him in. I would put him into the Hall of Fame. I know a lot of people would probably say Hall of Very Good. 200 wins in his career. He finally got that 200th win. I still remember 06 Game 7, Carlos Beltran looking at a curveball. But when I thought of the Cardinals of the 2000s, I thought of three guys. I thought of Adam Wainwright, I thought of Albert Pujols, and I thought of Yadier Molina. And the latter two are going to get into the Hall of Fame. And I think here's where we have to be differential when we talk Wainwright. 200 wins, I get it. It's not 300, but I don't think we'll ever see another 300 game winner unless a Verlander or a Scherzer just keeps pitching and pitching and pitching until they get there. I think Adam Wainwright is a Hall of Fame. Very good pitcher. Never won a Cy Young, so I think that might be held against him. But I would put him in. Zach Greinke was a great pitcher. Zach Greinke was a guy. He won multiple Gold Gloves. He won a World Series. I believe he pitched in big games. I just hope he doesn't get penalized for pitching in smaller markets. But he was outside of the Dodgers. He did. He pitched in smaller markets, Arizona, Kansas City. He did go to Houston. But Zach Greinke was a very good pitcher. And Terry Francona, I think, when I think of the 2000s, I think Terry Francona was the best manager of the 2000s for the Boston Red Sox. Broke the curse, won multiple World Series there. Then he went to Cleveland, and he put Cleveland on the map with a team that, let's be honest, they didn't spend money like the Boston Red Sox. And he made them generally competitive. So hats off to you, gentlemen. You all deserve your day in Cooperstown. So let's hope that it does happen for each and one of you. Okay. The thing I'm going to close out with, I'm going to close out with David Stearns, who had his introductory press conference today to become the new president of baseball operations for the New York Mets. I thought there was a couple of things that stood out for me. The first is the Buck Showalter news that Buck Showalter will not come back next year. I get it. David Stearns got to pick his own guy. He says he reached out to Buck this morning, and the two haven't talked yet, but he hopes to talk to him. First and foremost, thanks to Buck for 2 years where 2023 didn't go the Mets' way, but I don't think you can lay it all at Buck's feet. I think it goes to a lot of different perspectives. But Buck did a good job. David Stearns now gets to pick his guy. So this is now the time where we can say, let's see how this evaluation goes. I know the name Craig Counsell's been speculated. I know he's a free agent. I'm not going to automatically say he's the guy. There's one name. There are two names I don't want to hear, and I really would prefer a guy with experience over a guy being a first timer. But I really don't want to hear Carlos Beltran, and I really don't want to hear Gabe Kapler, who got let go by the Giants. Gabe Kapler, to me, he won 107 games one year with the Giants. The other years he underachieved, and he underachieved with the Phillies. So that's off the list. Counsell, okay, I'll wait on it. I'm not interested in Beltran. If he wants to be the bench coach and maybe that'll transition him into the managerial role, okay, sure. But I could do that with Eric Chavez too, so that doesn't matter. The two names I would want if it's not Craig Counsell, I'm a Joe Madden guy. I would love Joe Madden. I think it'd be a great fit. I think it'd be a fun fit. It'd be really interesting. Plus, he worked with Billy Epler in Anaheim. So that's part of this. The other name is Joe Espada. And Joe Espada's never been a manager. He's the Astros bench coach, but he's won. He's been around, and he's been interviewed. So that's a guy I would give a chance to. That's a guy who I would give a chance to more than a Carlos Beltran. If Beltran wants to help out in the front office, I dig it. I don't love him as a manager. I just don't. So that's part one of the Stearns thing. Part two, Pete Alonso. And David Stern said his press conference, I fully expect him to be our starting first baseman on opening day, and I'm looking forward to getting to know him. I certainly hope that he is a Met for a long time. That's what Stern said to the media today. That says to me that they're listening to the fans. The fans want Pete back. And if organizationally, if the money, and if they can figure out the terms, Pete's the guy at first base. I would say this, and I heard this on SNY. They don't have to do a Pete deal because he's not a free agent until after next year. They do have to do a Pete deal. And here's my reason why. Because if you don't get a Pete deal done now or this offseason or before spring training, whenever it would be, and he goes in as a lame duck next year, that would show that why do we love him? Pete's their guy. If you sign Pete long term, he's your guy. If you don't, and he's a lame duck as a first baseman, and you get outbid, let argument's sake, a team comes forward with him for 220 million, and you don't want to match it, and you lose Pete. First base is in a deep position. Pete Alonso is probably the third or fourth best first baseman in the league, behind Freeman and Goldschmidt and guys like that. If you have one, you pay them. They don't grow on trees, but I will say this. David Stearns talked about him being homegrown. I think that matters here to David Stearns. He talked a lot about growing your own talent. I think that's a massive win for the Mets. The other thing he talked about was the payroll situation. And it reminds me to when Steve Cohen first bought the team. Steve Cohen said, well, spend, but not like drunken sailors. And David Stearns kind of said a similar thing. If the free agent fit is right, we do have the resources to go get him, which means we're not going to go spend on a guy who's not a need, which I think is the totally right play. Total right play. You spend the money on players who fit and long, short-term deal, however it goes, they're not going to spend money willy nilly just because, hey, we have the money. And I kind of felt Steve Cohen got away from that last offseason, the last two offseasons when he brought in Scherzer and Verlander. And not that he spent like a drunken sailor, but it was like you have to weigh into account their age and how long are they going to be around here. Verlander didn't last a whole year, before they moved him. Scherzer a year and a half, so they were able to figure that out quickly. I liked everything I heard from David Stearns. I'm very hopeful that he can figure some things out. The manager being one, how this roster construction plays out, re-signing Pete, starting pitching is going to be at the forefront as well. It's a long off season. We'll cover everything. Myself and the old ops guy are going to handle some Met business at some point to talk about the season and going forward what to expect. So that's a preview of that. But again, the big thing for this was playoff preview. I'm in on the Houston Astros winning it all again. I think they beat the Braves or the Phillies. I'm not sure how that goes. I'll say the Phillies to be different, but I got the Astros repeating. That'll do it for this edition of the Batter Up podcast, sponsored by the Dugout of Millwood here on the Sports Insanity Network. Check out the website, www.thesportsinsanitynetwork.com. Great blogs, planes, trains, and automobiles. You check this podcast, any other Sports Insanity Network podcast out, wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, I'm Mike Rifkin. Thank you for listening to Batter Up, sponsored by the Dugout of Millwood here on the Sports Insanity Network. Have a good one, everybody.